14. But now when he had spent everything, a severe famine occurred in that country, and he began to be in need. Well, now things weren't looking so good. He spent everything, famine, he's hungry. Verse 15, he went and attached himself to one of the citizens of that country. And the citizen, he became like a slave to the citizen. He sent him in the fields, to feed swine. Do you know what the modern day equivalent of a Jewish boy feeding swine is? It's like being a Baptist preacher's son, working in a brewery, eating the hops and the barley off of the floor. It was shameful. It was disgraceful. It was unclean. Verse 16, and he was longing to fill his stomach with the pods that the swine were eating, but no one would give him anything. Man, he was hungry, and nobody was there to help him. You know, right here in the beginning of this parable, Jesus is telling us what happens if we run from God. I'm just going to recap that for you. Oh, this is good. Sorry. In verse 17, you know what? And I thought about this as I was working on the message about the first big lie of run from God. You see what happens? Verse 17, but when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired men have more than enough bread, but I am dying here with hunger? Key words, when I am coming to my senses. Because right here, folks, this is the second lie that Satan will feed you. I have absolutely no doubt about this. And what the second lie from Satan is, you can't go home. What are you talking about? You ran in the first place. Look at how you've messed up your life. Look at how unclean and filthy you are. You can't go back. You can't go back. So it's not enough that Satan lies to us in the first place to get us to run, but then he lies to us the second time to keep us from going back. So, recapping here before I go on with the parable, running away from God leads to being hungry. Prodigal son, he was hungry. Leads to being ashamed, disgraceful. He was ashamed of himself. And it leads to being lost. He had nowhere to go. He didn't know where to turn. And then the second part of the parable is so cool. Jesus tells us what happens when we run to God. This is after the prodigal son comes to his senses. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired men. And he got up and he came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion for him and ran for him and embraced him and kissed him. Get this. And when he got up and came to his father, while he, the son, was still a long way off, the father saw him. You know what this is saying right here, folks? The father was waiting for him to come home. The father was waiting for him to come home. Verse 21, and the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against you and heaven in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his slaves, quickly, bring the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet. You know what the father was doing? He was blessing his son. He was giving him gifts. He was blessing him. He waited for him, he welcomed him, and he blessed him. And bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let us eat and be merry. For this son of mine was dead, and now he's come to life again. He was lost, and now he's found. And they began to be merry. You see what Jesus is telling us there? Running to God, you'll be comforted. He's waiting for you. Running to God, he'll bless you. He will bless you. And running to God, you'll be found. The prodigal son was found. The prodigal son had meaning again. What Jesus is telling you is if you're on the run, you can go home. You know, I didn't tell you the ending part to my story and what I did when all of my balloons popped. I ran. I ran hard and I ran fast. I ran deep. I ran wide. Any way there was to run, I ran. 1989. I quit my job working with children and said, I will never teach kids again. I quit my passion for working with ministry and missions. I quit working at Youth for Christ and Campus Life. I was done with that. I decided to switch schools because maybe it was time for me to change my major. Yeah, like going into U.S. government, political science, and public administration, because, you know, somewhere in me I knew I wanted to make a change in the world, but maybe government was the way to do it, not teaching, not administrating. I changed everything. I even went as far as to try to change the way I look in hopes that that might do something. But you know, folks, one of the interesting things about my relationship with Bev is that after Bev died, I continued to journal. If you guys ever want to come into my office, you can open up my top shelf. 3 years of my life, 1989 to 1991, I didn't miss writing a day, and I wrote every detail of everything I felt and everything I experienced. But you see, when I made the choice to run from God, I fell for the lie. I fell for it, hook, line, sinker. But you know, I was so smart that even though in my heart I had already said, God, I'm going the other way, I decided, just in case he didn't know, that I was going to write him a letter. It says May 589, and this is what I wrote to God. Dear God, as I reach for that grain of sand and I leave this barren plain that I've been traveling on for what feels like so long, I wish it were really that simple to find words to describe this pain, words to describe this fear, words to describe this longing, words to describe my lacking direction and meaning, to clarify the confusion that swims inside of me, and to realize that only I have the power to make this decision. The weight of these feelings cover me like a blanket of darkness as I helplessly wait for daybreak. I feel the need to escape. I feel the need to run. I feel the need to hide. I must go, God. I must go. Yep, I made the choice, and I even wrote him a letter. I took my balloons and I threw them right back at him and said, I'm going my own way. Thanks for the ride. You know what I've learned on my run? It was so not worth it. I fell for the second lie. I fell for the part when I got so far gone that I couldn't go back. I honestly believe that I wasn't worthy to go back. I mean, I'm still not worthy of this love and this grace, but I felt I couldn't. I was ashamed. Friends, on top of entering into destructive relationships, changing my career, changing where I did school, I mentioned to you, I decided that maybe if I changed how I looked, I was a little bit chubby when I was in college, or maybe if I lost a little bit of weight, if I changed the outside appearance, maybe then, my life would feel better. Because like I said in that writing, I was confused, I was lost, I was looking for meaning. Friends, I plummeted into an eating disorder that nearly took my life 3 different times. I went from 125 pounds down to 82 pounds. I had received I actually have pictures here somewhere that I carry around with me just to remind myself of what I looked like when I weighed 82 pounds. Friends, I went to college. I graduated with nearly a 4-point. I graduated doing an honors thesis because I binged and purged and starved my way through my whole entire degree. I look back on those years when I was studying and what I accomplished. You know how much I remember? Hardly any of it. I was so deceived. I was so lost. At one point, I had received a scholarship to go to Western for public administration. I was so sick. My potassium level was so low. The doctor told me when I went into her office that if I did not eat a banana before walking out, she'd admit me to the hospital. I was so sick, I could not climb the stairs to get to my class. You know what I did? I lied to the scholarship committee and told them I needed to take a semester off because my mom had brain cancer. It was a total lie. I was totally running, totally lying. I needed to take time off so I could go into a hospital and try to get myself